The Covenant in Halo 3 is the series' jewel in the crown, a level so extraordinary that it's not just the best in the game it's featured in and in the Halo series as a whole, but also in the entire FPS genre. It may not be the trilogy's final mission, with 2 more following once it's concluded, but it certainly feels like it is, with basically everything that makes the series so beloved included by the bucket load. Some may think I'm over-exaggerating when I say this, but I genuinely believe it to be nigh on perfect. Before we dig deeper into why, here's a quick rundown of Halo 3's story so far. Crash landing on Earth after Halo 2, Master Chief is met by the Arbiter, Sergeant Johnson and a group of Marines, and together they trek to an evac point, before being swiftly ferried to a base known as the Crow's Nest. There, Fleet Admiral Hood and Miranda Keyes reveal that the Covenant plan to activate a Forerunner artifact in New Mombasa and lay out their plan to stop that from happening, but are interrupted when the facility comes under attack. After destroying the Crow's Nest and using the Savo Highway to journey to the nearby city of Voi, Chief brings down the Covenant's anti-air defences, at which point the UNSC launches a counterattack. Despite their best efforts, the Prophet of Truth is still able to activate the artifact and manages to escape using the slipspace portal it creates. However, there's no time to dwell on the near miss, as the flood-controlled Indulgence of Conviction appears in the skies above and crashes into the city. Cutting through wave after wave of flood to reach its wreckage, Master Chief finds 343 Guilty Spark as well as a message from Cortana, who warns that the flood will soon invade Earth proper and that the key to stopping them likely lies on the other side of the portal. Heading through it, Chief and company arrive at the Ark, a Forerunner facility with the power to both activate every Halo and build new ones. Reaching its map room, 343 Guilty Spark explains that 3 shield generators must be powered down so the Prophet of Truth can finally be stopped, and so the UNSC once again goes on the offensive. The Covenant opens with one of the series' best cutscenes, featuring pelicans approaching an island as a beautiful arrangement of Halo's theme swells in the background.
We hit these 3 generators, and the barrier will fall?
A small section, yes.
Good enough. Johnson, drop the Chief at the first generator, then head to the 3rd. The elites will punch right down the middle.
Roger that.
It and the section which follows are as clear an homage to Halo Combat Evolved's The Silent Cartographer as there could be, and that's no bad thing. The Silent Cartographer's beginning remains one of the series' most enthralling moments to this day. Indeed, it's a premise which proves so popular, Bungie even used it a 3rd time 3 years later at the start of Halo Reach's Long Night of Solace. Taking control of Master Chief, what follows is perhaps the best beach landing of the 3. There are definitely elements of its design carried over from the Silent Cartographer. Halo Combat Evolved's rendition is very cleverly designed in the way it uses a large open space to give the encounter scale, but groups most of its enemies and cover in its centre. As a result, combat is intense despite the beach's huge size, as you're funneled down its middle, and that helps ensure its pace never slows for the duration of the battle. Bungie does similar during the Covenant's first firefight by placing the majority of the action directly ahead of you, with tightly packed groups of Covenant used to encourage you to remain in the middle of the area. There are also several additions which make it a more engaging affair, at least from a gameplay perspective. One thing it definitely has over the Silent Cartographer, and to be fair this is due to a hardware advantage as much as anything else, is its vastly improved sense of scale. In addition to what's happening on the ground, a massive battle is taking place in the skies above you, which helps add extra grandeur and makes everything feel far more expansive. This is the last level in the trilogy during which you'll face the Covenant, and it certainly feels like the final standoff with them. Another is the Covenant's variety. The area's terrain features increased complexity, including more verticality and a second route down the area's right-hand side, which is extremely easy to miss. The main path straight through the middle of the beach is the one I'd imagine most will take, especially during a first playthrough, but the particularly observant are rewarded with an alternative route which gives a better sightline of the 2 turrets standing in your way. This is so important because the start of the Covenant is the first ever time you get to use the Spartan laser. The pair of turrets essentially give you an opportunity to test out the weapon and immediately understand what its strengths are, namely quickly destroying turrets, vehicles, and sometimes more powerful enemies. If you maneuver around the side of the area, you're able to take them out from a safe distance without having to worry too much about enemies nearby. If you push directly forward, you're greeted with a buffer zone of sorts once you've cleared the immediate area, one devoid of anything which might block your shots or Covenant who could get in the way. Whichever you choose, you're able to use the terrain to your advantage to remain relatively safe while getting to grips with the new weapon. Then, once you've moved past the turrets, you'll come across a single vehicle and you'll hopefully again use the Spartan laser to your advantage. This is extremely clever level design on Bungie's part and a wonderful way of presenting a learning opportunity to you in a space which is not necessarily designed with that as its primary purpose, like tutorial areas so often are. It's an easy thing to miss, and hats off to Bungie for creating such a subtle, teachable moment. As the beach scene concludes, a pelican arrives and drops off a warthog.
Spark believes Truth can activate the rings at any time. If he does, Earth, every being in the galaxy, Halo will kill them all. Get to the first tower, shut it down.
Which is another callback to the Silent Cartographer, and again, much like in that mission, it's dropped facing the direction you need to head next. It's hardly revolutionary game design, but it's a nice example of the little things developers can do to make your life that much easier. The vehicle section which follows is a classic example of Bungie's ability to expertly control pacing by mixing up the size of a mission's environments. What you'll nearly always experience in one form or another in almost every Halo level is multiple shifts between narrow and wide areas. The beach was narrow and relatively claustrophobic, and you then move into an area which is still fairly narrow but is certainly more open. Soon after, you transition into what is perhaps the largest environment featured in the Covenant so far, and when the battle there has concluded, you again move back into a much more narrow set of hallways. From the beach onwards, the level gradually increases in scope, and when Bungie decides it's opened up enough, things are scaled back down for a tighter indoor section. It's classic Halo level design which keeps events feeling fresh and engaging throughout. Next time you're playing a Halo game, pay attention to the level design in each mission, and I almost guarantee you'll notice the same narrow to wide, or vice versa, design philosophy being used all over the place. Reaching the first indoor section, there's not a whole lot to highlight gameplay-wise, so I think this is the perfect moment to talk about the Covenant's music. This level really shows off just how brilliant Halo 3's soundtrack is, and I think it's the best collection of tracks featured in one mission in the entire series. Whether it's the different takes on Halo's theme used during the opening cutscene or beach set piece, or the inclusion of popular tracks or reworks of them from previous entries, such as Leonidas Returns from Halo 2 or Shadows from Halo Combat Evolved, there's a little bit of everything sprinkled in throughout. The great Martin O'Donnell himself, who is responsible for the trilogy's amazing scores alongside Michael Salvatore, was even kind enough to leave a comment about it on another one of my videos. He highlighted the adaptive nature of the score and how its seamless sound design and music would change to match your experience depending on how you played the level. For me, Martin's words only serve to cement my view that the Covenant is the best of Halo in pretty much every regard, whether that be story, gameplay, or indeed music. After clearing out the area's lower level, you jump on a lift and find yourself in a brute-filled hallway. The encounter itself isn't anything particularly out of the ordinary, but do keep it in the back of your minds as I'll be returning to it a little later in this video. Once all the brutes have been cleared, you deactivate the first tower.
Good work, Chief. That's one. The Arbiter should be just about to... That's two. It's all up to Johnson's team now. Get back outside, Chief. Wait for transport.
Before you head back outside and retrace your steps all the way back to the beach. I'm not a massive fan of having to do so after such a dynamic start to the Covenant, but what comes next more than makes up for it as you experience your second first of the level. The Spartan laser made its debut at the start of the Covenant, and this time it's the turn of the Hornet to make its grand entrance into the series. I mentioned earlier that this mission really feels like the Covenant's last stand, and I did so with good reason. Bungie themselves have said similar, adding that because of that they wanted to pull out all the stops. And my word, do they pull out all the stops. The fact Bungie introduces the Hornet, and indeed the Spartan laser for the first time, is a clear statement of intent, a demonstration of just how important they considered the Covenant to be. This singular focus on making the level as spectacular as it could possibly be extends to the rest of its runtime as well. You have the opportunity to use nearly every weapon featured in the game and most of its vehicles. You get to fight alongside Marines, Elites, and even the Flood. And last but not least, it also features what is probably the most breathtaking set piece in the entire series, which we'll get to very shortly. There are plenty of games which continue to throw everything and the kitchen sink at you in their latter stages, and often that doesn't work particularly well, so it really is testament to the strength of Halo 3's gameplay and mechanics that Bungie were able to include nearly everything the game has to offer in one mission without it ever feeling forced or like there's too much going on. As the trilogy nears its conclusion, it's a fitting display of Bungie's mastery of the genre, developed over the 6 years following Halo Combat Evolved's release in 2001. While we admire the lovely views, a quick note also on environmental consistency, something Bungie has always excelled at. During the Covenant, you're constantly given glimpses of other parts of the world you'll soon be travelling to, whether that's the 3 towers themselves at the beginning, the view of everything you get from the Hornet, or the multiple glimpses of the area where you'll later fight the 2 Scarabs you get when you visit each tower. It means you're always progressing in a logical, consistent manner, which is a vital part of making the level feel more real. All good things must unfortunately come to an end, however, and eventually you'll be left with no choice but to vacate your Hornet and head back inside to disable the 2nd tower. Again, you'll come across more brutes in the area where the controls are housed, and after taking them down, you're able to complete your objective. Except Bungie decides to throw in a twist as the Flood arrive on the scene.
Hi, Charity. By the gods, brace for impact!
And with the previously dispatched brutes now alive and kicking, or kicking at least, you're faced with an entirely new challenge. It's a great way of taking 2 areas that would otherwise be relatively uninteresting and using them to toy with your expectations. The first tower helps build a sense of familiarity, and the second uses the Flood to turn that on its head. Fittingly for a mission with such a high bar for quality throughout, even the Flood are handled really well. The Covenant features short, sharp bursts of Halo's iconic space zombies, often as part of multi-faction encounters, and that is, I think, the best way to handle them. They're featured in this section, they're featured at the end of the mission, and that's it. Used in this manner, there's no time for their signature move of run directly at you to get boring, and they work well contrasted against more tactical assaults by the Covenant. It stands in stark contrast to Cortana, the mission the Covenant precedes, which features only the Flood, and is, to be blunt, not the best Halo has to offer. If the beginning of the Covenant was an homage to the Silent Cartographer, then this next section featuring a Scorpion in the snow surely functions similarly for another Combat Evolved level, this time Assault on the Control Room. In fact, for those of you who are fans of that game in particular, there are a ton of opportunities to relive some of its most iconic moments throughout Halo 3, the good and on one occasion the bad. There's the beach and tank sequences in the Covenant I've already mentioned, the Warthog escape sequence in Halo is clearly inspired by the Maw, and even Cortana feels like a pseudo-sequel to the library, although that's probably not a great thing. The Covenant packs in almost everything which makes Halo great, and the allusions to classic missions cements its status as a real love letter to the series. The incredible set piece I mentioned earlier, comprised of a battle against not 1 but 2 Scarabs, repeat, 2 Scarabs, is superb, and my view has changed somewhat since I last spoke about this level in any great detail. I still dislike the fact that they don't really move from the spot where they land. Really, all they do is sit in one place and occasionally turn to face you, which stands in stark contrast to the Scarab featured in earlier mission The Storm, which was constantly moving around the arena. They land on patches of dark ground, which are very obviously there before they arrive too, which doesn't help as it really highlights how little they travel from their entry point. However, following my recent video on The Storm, a lot of people pointed out that I'd neglected to mention the ridiculous amount of variety featured in its Scarab encounter, and in that regard, the Covenant takes the idea even further. Bungie really does leave it up to you to choose how you tackle things, and there are an incredible number of options on offer. You can go in on foot, although that's probably not the best idea. You can use the Scorpion you likely drove into the area. You can pilot a Hornet or hop in the passenger seat of one while a Marine flies you around. You can hijack one of the numerous enemy vehicles to get the job done, or if you want to channel your inner stuntman, you can use one of the ramps to try and jump your way onto them. How you deal with the issue at hand is left entirely up to you, and in a sense, that is what Halo has always been about, giving you a wealth of options and letting your imagination run wild. As you finally near the Prophet of Truth, no doubt rather jubilant following your triumph against overwhelming odds, you're brought back down to Earth as Miranda Keys' fate is revealed.
One of you will light the rings. You cannot hope to kill them all.
You're right.
Do it. Me. Then you. Now. No!
There's really no time to waste either, as shortly after, Truth uses Johnson to activate the Halo array. Thankfully, you have some backup as you fight your way forward, although not in the form you might expect.
Do not shoot, but listen. Let me lead you safely to our foe. Only you can halt what he has set in motion.
As hopeful music builds in the background, you aren't joined by Marines or even elites, but rather the Flood. Charging forward alongside your newfound allies, the Covenant does something completely unique to any Halo game before or since. For the briefest of moments, you get to feel what it's like to be a part of the Flood. This is a brilliant decision on Bungie's part. Not only is it an incredibly memorable way to end one of Halo's most memorable levels, it also serves a secondary purpose. Once the Covenant has concluded, the only enemy left for you to finish off is the Flood, and so it makes perfect sense you're given the opportunity to see things through their eyes, so to speak, to better understand what it's like to be on the other side. For me, it absolutely makes the Flood seem like an even more imposing threat, as you experience firsthand how quickly they are able to overwhelm the Covenant, and that works especially well when combined with the area it takes place in, one featuring narrow bridges packed full of enemies and allies, which makes your, and by extension the Flood's, assault seem all the more relentless as a result. Brute forcing your way to the Prophet of Truth works wonders too, as Master Chief and the Arbiter finally come face to face with him.
I am Truth, the voice of the Covenant. So, you must be silenced.
Once he's been dealt with, the Flood inevitably turn their attention back towards you, but before you take them on, the cutscene also finishes with this shot of the pair standing back to back, brothers in arms. It is fantastic. You'll next also come to the startling realization you now have to make your way back through the hordes of Flood you so recently fought alongside. It's one of those fantastically unsettling moments that they so often provide, with your terror felt all the more acutely because you've just seen the other side of things, watching them overwhelm the Covenant with relative ease. The classic Flood theme of sorts, Shadows, used since Combat Evolved, kicks in, and you fight the level's final battle before meeting up with Guilty Spark and concluding the mission.
A replacement. The ring you destroyed.
When did you know?
Just now. But I had my hopes. What will you do?
Light it.
Then we are agreed. A tactical pulse will completely eradicate the local infestation. I will personally oversee the final preparations, though it will take time to fabricate.
There's no doubt in my mind that the Covenant is Bungie's magnum opus. Story-wise, it's one of the most important levels in the trilogy, and the way it's designed from start to finish does so much to make it feel incredibly climactic. It's not just in the way levels are designed, the variety of allies, enemies, weapons, and vehicles used, or even the brief opportunity to fight alongside the Flood. It's because this level feels like Bungie took everything brilliant about Halo and packed it into one tightly paced, expertly constructed experience. From start to finish, you are kept on the edge of your seat, and every time you begin to settle into a rhythm completing whatever your immediate task is, Bungie will throw in a curveball which usually changes things up completely. Halo 3 may still have 2 more levels remaining after the Covenant concludes, the first a bit dodgy and the second far better, but for me, the Covenant will always be the level that helped ensure the Halo trilogy finished in truly spectacular fashion. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a floody good time, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and with any luck, we'll meet again soon.